Okay, I think we can go ahead and we've got some people rolling in. We can go through some of the housekeeping slides as people are signing in. Hello to everybody who's here and welcome to the Adobe Marketo Engage Champions office hours for June 2023. And my name is Christiane Rhodes. I am a two-time Marketo certified expert, and I am the senior marketing automation consultant for CNA, and I have been using Marketo since 2017. And I'm going to kick it over to the rest of the panel to introduce themselves. Beth, did you want to go ahead and start us off?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. My name is Beth Massura. Pronouns are she, her. I'm a senior marketing operations consultant at Etumos, and I'm looking forward to answering your questions today. Lauren, go ahead.
Cool. Hey, I'm Lauren McCormack, VP over at Revenue Pulse. We're a marketing and RevOps consulting firm, and excited to be here. I'm a 5-time certified Marketo expert and 2-time champ.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jane Musatova. I'm a product marketing manager and ops manager at Wix.com. I'm currently responsible for all kinds of automation within the company. And just last year became the Marketo certified expert for the first time, and 2022 Marketo champion. Excited to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Ajay Sarpal. I'm based out in India. It's been 23 years since I have been working on various marketing automation platforms and close to 14 years of using Marketo. And I'm 4 times Marketo champion, 3 times Marketo subject matter expert, and subject matter expertise title is given to those who are responsible for building certification exam questions. So I have written certification exam questions on associate, expert, and architect level, and that makes me a Marketo certified solution architect as well. So very excited to be a part of this panel and looking forward to answer any potential questions which you all may have.
Okay, thanks everyone. Our agenda for today, we can go over some house rules, some general housekeeping, some Adobe opportunities, and then we will jump into our panel discussion where you all answered a question when you were registering about your scalability of your instance. So that will be the main topic for today among the rest of your questions. So just some house rules today. In order to ensure that our mugs stay user focused and a safe space for the members, we want to make sure that there's no self-promotion or pitching of any kind at mug events. Don't contact people outside of the user group without their consent. And then if a mug member shares their use case, if someone is sharing their use case with the group, please don't share that information without their consent. This meeting is being recorded, so we want to make sure that we're notifying all attendees that this meeting has been recorded and that it will be posted on the Adobe YouTube channel to promote training, education, and future learning after the event. And because it is being recorded, you will be provided with the recording and slides after the event. If you do not wish to participate in the live recorded session, please feel free to watch the recording that's provided after the event. And you can go ahead, if you have any questions, go ahead and email advocacy@adobe.com. Stay connected with this chapter and with all of the other mugs, either in your region or you can attend virtual events as well. You can go to mugs.marketo.com and then you can navigate. There are all sorts of geographic regions and there is a specific area for the Champion Office Hours mug. If you're here, you probably are already a member, but go ahead and click join. You use the email account that's associated with your Adobe Marketo Engage account to join. And then once you've joined the chapter, you'll receive notifications and reminders about new events. And speaking of those events, we've got some upcoming mug events. Tomorrow, there's going to be an in-person London mug meeting at the Adobe Marketo Mixer at the EMEA Summit. Next week, the New York mug is having an in-person meeting as well as the San Francisco mug. And then later on in June, there are going to be hybrid and virtual meetings across the US in Minneapolis, the North America virtual mug in Kansas City and Denver. And then for our international members, we do have some additional opportunities in the months of June and July. We've got on the 13th, the Germany mug is having their meeting, and then Japan is we've got 2 meetings on the calendar on June 22nd and on July 13th. And then at the end of June, there's the Netherlands mug, and then in the middle of July, we have the Munich mug. We have some upcoming webinars that we want to make sure you know about. On June 21st, you can join Ambika Shetty, Senior Product Manager at Adobe, and Nikki Wang, Product Marketing Manager at Adobe, as they discuss as you can get the scoop on journeys and the visualizations of campaigns on Marketo Engage, and that's on June 21st. And then on June 28th, you can join our very own Ajay, as well as fellow champion Andy Carone, as they share their years of wisdom on how to best use features within Marketo Engage and Marketo Measure. On the slides that you receive after the event, both you can register, click the links in the slides to be able to register for both of these events. And then we did have at least one question come in about certification. So we have some information for you here. There are 3 different certifications available for Adobe professionals. So the very first one is, it's replaced the Marketo Certified Associate. It's the Adobe Certified Professional, Adobe Marketo Engage. And this one's good for beginner users, so folks who have had about 3 to 6 months of Marketo Engage training. Then we have the Adobe Certified Expert Adobe Marketo Engage Business Practitioner exam. This one replaces the MCE exam. And then you need about 18 months of hands-on experience for that. And then finally, they have the Adobe Certified Master Adobe Marketo Engage Architect exam. And this one is for folks who have about 5 years of experience designing marketing automation using Marketo Engage. So you can go ahead and click the links in these slides after the events. And then we also have links to information about what it takes to be able to achieve any of these certifications, what's on the exam, and then there are also some practice tests available there. Okay, and with that, I'll go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we can go ahead and start with our questions. So when everybody registered, we asked everybody a question, and that question was, how scalable is your Marketo instance today? So we had a lot of you answer this question, and we had we had answers from all across the board. So 10% of you have said that your instance is not scalable at all. So this is a great place for you to be today. And then 21% said that your instance is incredibly scalable. Still a great place for you to be. We can learn tips and trades from everybody. But then the majority of folks has said that your instance is 69% said your instance is moderately scalable. So hopefully this conversation will help get you on that way to being in that top tier today. So we can start it off with just, Beth, I'll kick it to you first. So how can folks use the native features in Marketo to scale their processes and to scale things that are going on for them?
Great question. So there's a couple things that come to mind. Of course, there will be many other things that we talk about today that will relate to the different features. However, a couple things that folks should take advantage of are things like executable campaigns, which can be reused for multiple purposes. So basically, rather than having the same flow steps across multiple campaigns, you're saving all the same steps in a single campaign and then using that in multiple places. So there's some content out there about how to use executable campaigns. The idea is that you don't want to repeat yourself. And I know fellow champ Amy Goldfine has done a lot of presentations on the idea of dry cleaning your instance, DRY, standing for don't repeat yourself, with the idea is that you don't want to have the exact same things created in multiple places. It's harder to manage. And if you have to make updates, now you have to make updates across all of them. So executable campaigns are definitely a way to help with that. Another thing that comes to mind is using what we generally call program templates or a center of excellence. And those basically mean having a shell program for each of your different channel types with all the assets, smart campaigns, program status progressions and the like. And then you clone that each time that you need to make a marketing program. So rather than building from scratch, which you can do, but if you end up having to rebuild the exact same things every time, it's much more efficient and scalable to create what's program template once and then clone it and customize it based on your particular marketing program. So those are 2 specific things that I think can really help within Marketo native features.
Thanks. Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I think with the executable campaigns, that's still something that people are really getting used to, especially with the other option of request campaigns. So I think that that's really helpful for folks to learn, to get digging into. So I think too that what might bring me to the next kind of general question about scalability, because I think scalability means, you know, lots of things to different people. So what are just some overall best practices when folks are thinking about even starting up, if they want to move from I'm not scalable at all to moderately scalable, or going from that, getting to that top tier? Lauren, do you have any tips for some best practices that folks can do when they're just starting out?
For sure. Yeah. Great to be here. Hi, everybody. Echoing what Beth had to say, right, about templates and a center of excellence, that is super critical. But even more so, you need governance from a human being, right? You need processes and defined roles and protocols that are established on the team, that have one single kind of MOPS admin soul to govern and caretake and make sure that they enforce the templates and optimize the templates. I like to think of the templates as like the cookbook of the master chef, right? And you can change the menu, you can alter the recipes, but you're teaching your whole team how to make these recipes the exact same way every time they prepare a dish at your restaurant, right? So your line cooks, your sous chef, everybody down the line needs to understand how the templates work so that they make the meals consistently, so that you have less room for errors and mistakes, so that you have more efficient processes, so you work faster, right? 2023 is the year of efficiency, as many say ad nauseum these days, right? And the way to be efficient is to not reinvent the wheel. I love the notion of, not duplicating efforts when you can save the time. So I really think that a center of excellence that's governed and curated by somebody that is taking care of the company, taking care of the instance, and being the single head chef is really critical. But then also data governance is super critical for scalability, right? So thinking about how you're going to manage your data future forward and your integrations, that'll either make or break your scalability. So tossing that out, I think, for the champ hive mind here to kick around a bit too. But thanks, Christian.
Anyone else have any tips that they've been thinking about, or when they've been setting up their companies for scalability? And I think too that one of the things that, and this is something that had come in for us as well, is that, scalability does mean different things depending on the size of your organization. So some things that a smaller company might use might not be applicable to folks who work for a larger organization, and vice versa. And so, Jane, do you have any advice for anybody that might be in one of those larger organizations where sometimes scalability can seem a little bit overwhelming?
Yeah, for sure. And I've experienced that firsthand when we would start working with Marketo, with one company within a large organization, and then other teams would consider using it. And then in the end, we would have multiple partitions, sometimes multiple instances. So I'd say plan accordingly, think how you're going to utilize the system. If you're going to be using multiple CRMs, if one of your teams is using HubSpot, another one is using Salesforce, are there going to be multiple salespeople getting leads, and also like whether the lead gen process is going to be similar or different? And I would also work with the BI team to understand how the events are being pushed from one system to another. What are the things that are important for you in the attribution model? Are you going to be using subscription-based models within the product? Are you going to be sending product emails, transactional ones, through the same system? So these are all the things to consider before. It's best to consider before setting up the system. But if you can't plan that far ahead, then I would say everything that Lauren and Beth just mentioned is super critical when you're moving from a 100 people company to 5,000 or 6,000 one. So make sure to keep your instance clean, to do all the due diligence, to deactivate assets that are no longer being in use, and to archive folders and programs. Definitely using templates is helpful. Plan how you go, what are like the events, what are the content pieces that you'd like to be using, and create folders based on the type of the content rather than on the date that it's being produced per month. Last month, we discussed how to manage those assets based on different content in the best way. So I'd say, yeah, all of that, creating a center of excellence, training your team, and creating the right onboarding that's adequate and self-explanatory, doesn't take months. And I think that will help you to succeed.
And those are some really great tips, especially about like archiving content and when you're inheriting something and you walk into things and are not totally sure about what to do with some of these older assets. So, and that I think that's a good thing to touch on, because that's part of scaling up, is knowing what's in there, what's old. Ajay, do you have any best practices that you would be thinking about with regards to cleaning up old content and looking about archive content?
Yeah, means I'll just share an experience of one of my client that, I audited the instance of that client. And when I looked into it, I found that there were almost 5,000 emails those were created, and there were more than 2,000 landing pages set up. So, the thing is that a lot of clutter can definitely make us look unorganized. And when we talk about the best practices, then the best thing is, first of all, to create an archive folder just in case if you have not done it. So, if we start with crawl, walk, and run approach, then, create an archive folder and add the old programs to the archive folder. So that would be the one thing. Second thing that you could actually do, that, you can actually see the Marketo automatic trigger campaign cleanup service, because, with the help of that, you can get to know which smart campaigns are actually with ideal trigger, and those which have not been run in the past 6 months, and then you could actually check those which have been deactivated, and then try to move those in the archive folder. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is the organization. So just in case if you're following the best practices, when we talk about how you're naming a program or an asset, or how you're archiving everything within the folder. So these are the most important thing. As per the best practices, if we go with the naming of a program, we always add the year and the month. If you're doing that, it is very easy. You can always filter based on the program names, and then the job is done. This is something that I usually do, that, whenever I'm setting up Marketo, I always follow the folder structure in that way. Let's assume if there is a folder for webinar, so it will be housed under events, and within the webinar folder, I will be creating folders for respective years. Just in case if you have organized the data in that manner, then, it is easier for you to move the programs from the past 3-4 years and then move these to the archive folder. So that would be the another thing which I would suggest. And there are a couple of things which you could do. One among those would be to see the reports, like landing page performance reports. So the example that I gave you about one client of mine, definitely they didn't follow the best practices when it comes to the naming convention, and how to find it out which landing pages are still active or not. So, you can always log into Marketo, go to analytics and see the landing page performance report and see when was the last activity that was done on those specific pages. Export those, and then, it is slightly a manual job, and then perhaps you will be able to find out the ones which are redundant, and then you should be good to archive those. And the similar thing, if you have multiple emails which are created in the past, you could actually check the email performance report and try to filter the redundant ones and move those to the archive folder. And then in addition to that, there is a campaign inspector module of Marketo. The beauty of that campaign inspector module is that, it can actually give you the list of all active or inactive programs. And just in case, if you think, and it can also guide you whether it was associated with the trigger or not, you could just simply use that, find it out, that, which of the trigger program which are inactivated or deactivated, perhaps filter those, and then it is going to be a little bit of manual job to move these to the archive folder. And these are the things which I would suggest. But the biggest thing is that if you're following the best practices when how you're naming your assets program, it shouldn't be a big task to do.
And we actually had someone else ask a question too. And when you're doing that naming convention, when you're setting things up, do you have any best practices regarding different types of assets? So are you going to be have a different naming convention for your emails versus your forms versus landing pages? How would you handle that?
So I will first start with the forms. Oh, sorry, not forms, with the programs. So the program usually starts with the abbreviation of the campaign or the channel type. Let's assume if it is trade show. So I will start with TS, that stands for trade show, followed by year, month, and I also add the date. And after that, I add a name of that specific event. Within that, I house everything in campaigns folder, or within assets folder. Sorry, within assets folder, I will be having email folder, campaigns folder, and then the list and the report folder. So this is how that I do. And when we are, and I usually organize forms if those are not global within the program itself. So I usually don't add date to it because it is within the program and it is local to the program. So in that scenario, I just only specify whether it is a contact us form or a content download form. Need not to add date again and again because you have already added the date to the program. But if it is going to be a global asset, then in that scenario you should add the year, month, and date, and then a little bit of description about that specific form.
And Lauren, you had a great tip in the chat there that people tend to get hung up on naming conventions. Do you have any advice about, I know, and you talked about documentation as well. That's so critical to it. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's not one size fits all. I think we have a good starting point. Ajay said some brilliant and wonderful things as ever. Around making sure you think about geos and dates, years and months. But I think we start with kind of the general best practice definition, but you shouldn't be afraid to kind of tailor it to fit the org, right? And when you're looking at the reporting, upstream, and when people downstream on your team are going to be looking at the naming conventions, making sure that it's somewhat meaningful, I think, is a very personal journey for a company. You don't want it to sound like some kind of serial number. You want people in a report, like an email performance report or something, to be able to get a general idea of what they're looking at. So whether that's, region or asset type or program type, right? You want to make sure there's some kind of meaningful value that you can glean at a glance while also keeping posterity in mind and knowing that the instance will live on beyond you. I think I've been under the hood, after, over a decade, I've been under the hood of more instances than I care to admit most days. And I always use the analogy, it's like opening somebody else's closet, and you're like, okay, is the bowling ball going to fall and hit me on the head? Is everything stuffed in there and about to explode? Or am I going to find color-coded hangers that have corresponding outfits of the same color, in a California closet with the shoe organizer and all the tank tops neatly folded like it was in a retail store? I've yet to find that, by the way. I dream of it. But you're making a legacy here, and likely someone else is going to have to step in at some point and either help you, or they might even be taking over and, starting over and figuring out, reverse engineering what you've created here. And do you want it to be chaos? This is a reflection of your blood, sweat, and tears here. So try and keep it tidy and make sure that it's understandable and sensibly organized, and the clutter piles up quick. It's crazy how fast it can pile up if you just think, oh, I know I need naming conventions. I know I need foldering. I know I need structure. I'll get to that later. Like 3 months go by and you're buried. So thinking about it early and defining it, don't get hung up on the details too much. Just make sure you put something in place to keep things tidy.
And I think too that we've been talking a lot about, the assets as a whole, but the other aspect of a lot of scalability is also understanding your data and what's behind it. Because as we all know, you can't personalize if you don't have the data to support it. So I want to talk a little bit about data cleanliness and data health. Beth, can you give any sort of insights into how someone might scale database cleanliness or automate purge cycles, or what folks might do in order to optimize the health of their database?
Sure. So at first, all of the records that you are getting in Marketo are going to be fresh and new. Maybe you just collected them, they just fill out your form. But as years pass by, people might drop off. Maybe they've changed jobs. Maybe they're no longer interested. Maybe they've already gotten an alternate solution in place. And so you don't want your Marketo database to be filled with a bunch of records that are not going to be useful to you. The whole point of having a Marketo Engage is to be able to nurture and surface people for the sales team. And if these are people that don't exist anymore or aren't interested, that's never going to be valuable for your sales team. So you can use some different smart lists or smart campaigns to help identify records which have had no activity. Keep in mind that there's data retention policies, so certain activities will only be available for 90 days or 25 months. But you can identify the people that maybe aren't valuable, or if they're blacklisted, like you're never going to market to them, so why are they in your database? So these can help identify people that you don't necessarily need to keep in your database. However, you do want to cross-check that against people that you would want to keep in your database for some reason, especially if you're considering also deleting them on the Salesforce side. For example, maybe they've had some sales activity. Maybe they're a contact that's associated with an opportunity in Salesforce. You definitely don't want to delete those. So highly recommended that you cross-check in that way. And while it's tempting to have automated deletion processes, I do not recommend that. Always have human oversight, because once you delete them, they're gone. Something like Salesforce has a recycling bin. Marketo does not. So always double check and validate before deleting, but by kind of cross-checking against what you do need to keep, that's less likely to delete people that you actually need. But those are some ways that folks can kind of keep an eye on records that are likely candidates for removal. And this will help keep you under your database limit. So ultimately, it can save your company money too. Why hold on to things that aren't going to provide value and are costing you more? So definitely recommended.
Thank you. That is all. I mean, I know that that's all very, very, very helpful information. And there have been a ton of, if folks are looking in the chat, there are a bunch of blogs, champion blogs, that have been adding, that folks have posted about this information as well. And I think that and the removal of people and kind of managing that database brings to mind like another topic that personally is very important to me, but it's managing the existence of duplicates. And sometimes folks have them and they're intentional, but sometimes they are just not. Ajay, do you have any tips about how folks can manage those duplicates? Because maybe you don't know which one you're supposed to keep, and you want to make sure that you are identifying the right one before you, as Beth said, say goodbye forever, and you don't want to make a mistake and delete the wrong one.
Yeah, I completely agree with Brett's suggestions over here. In my opinion, the first thing is to identify the source of duplicates. Means, why the duplicate is being created. Because, we can merge, there are multiple ways of merging it, which I will get to it later. But the most important thing is to identify the source, whether the duplicates are being created in CRM. If yes, what is the reason behind it? If a sales executive or the SDR is able to create a duplicate, then it is as easy as fixing or adding a duplicate condition in the CRM, and then we are good. to prevent the duplicates. There could be scenarios like, we have custom Marketo sync enabled. So that could be another potential source of creating duplicates, because if we are hiding certain contacts from Salesforce to sync to Marketo, then perhaps those records, if they are going to fill out the form, they will be they're going to get added as a duplicate in Marketo, and they're going to be duplicates in the CRM. So the most important thing is to identify the source. And once the source is identified, then there are multiple ways of preventing these duplicates. And now everything will depend upon the size of the duplicate data and how often these databases or how often we get duplicates. So let's assume if you have a few hundred, which is highly unlikely the case. I have never seen any instance of Marketo where we have 200 or 300 duplicates. I have seen in thousands to be precise. So just in case, if you're lucky and if you have less than 100 or 200 duplicates, you can always go in the database section and merge those manually. I have never seen that happening in my life. The another thing would be that you could actually take the Marketo's merge lead in the bulk services. This is a paid functionality. You need to work with your CSM and get that thing addressed. And then there are various workarounds as well if you identify the duplicate. So the first source of duplicate would be the CRM. And then, if the leads are being created by the sales team, then, there is a duplicate prevention rule, custom sync that could create that. There could be leads which are coming through the APIs. Those can also potentially create duplicates. If that is the situation, then we need to see which type of tool we are using to pull the data to our Marketo CRM. Let's assume if we are using Zapier. The beauty of Zapier is that it can have it is already having a functionality through which it can detect duplicates. Just in case if that is not being turned on, use that step and so to prevent duplicates. So that would be the one approach of fixing from those records which are being created through APIs. And when it comes to merging, there are various paid tools also available. I'm not sure if I could take the names. I have all those names readily available. One was my client, but yeah, it is as easy as logging into the launch point of Marketo. You will be able to see those tools which are paid, through which you can actually set up the batch processes, which will run either daily or once in every hour or maybe once in every month based on the criteria. And these are going to merge duplicates based on the order or based on the cadence which we are going to set it up. That maybe perhaps if a contact that is associated with an opportunity, that should be the primary contact if that is being merged with the duplicate leads of Salesforce. So there are multiple ways of doing it. The best way would be is always find out the root cause of duplicates and try to control it over there. And then thereafter, if it is a one-time fix, take the help from Marketo's paid services, and then you should be good. But if you think that, maybe God forbid, you have that processes through which you have zero control on, and there are still duplicates which are being generated or being added to Marketo database, then, you can take the services from paid tools. There are many tools available which you would be able to see in the launch point. And then, all you need to do is set up the criteria for finding out duplicates. And then you can also set up the criteria how you would like to merge these duplicates, what is going to be the order, which record you would like to keep and which one you would like to get deleted. So yeah, these are my tips about merging duplicates.
And I can see in the chat, thank you, Ajay. I can see in the chat that people are very passionate about this as well. We had a question come in that said, my instance has 2,400 duplicates and syncs/resyncs with Salesforce. What advice would you have to clean these? Jane, did you want to, Jane or anybody, really anybody? I mean, I know everybody's answering questions in the chat, so anybody feel free to chime in on some of their best practices regarding this.
I commented that it's best to revisit those rules that are being used in Salesforce, and like you can use what Lauren suggested, the webhook, or like you can create custom rules on the duplication depending on what you want to keep. And also I would recommend to use a one-way sync and like define that like only specific leads are being synced to Salesforce. And if leads don't get synced, then like one of the rules could be that they either duplicates or like they don't match the criteria, and then you would add them to a specific program that you would have to like review on certain basis, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly, depending on how important it's for you and how many leads do you intake on a daily basis. Those are my main advices.
Thanks. Yes, there are a ton of links that have been provided. So if you're running into this issue, we've got help available on the side there. So I guess too that's another topic with auditing the instance as well, and just kind of taking a look at everything as a whole and just kind of seeing what's working, what's not working. So, Beth, how would someone go about auditing their instance and maybe diagnosing some sort of issue that could be potentially causing some issues?
So one of the issues that I see most frequently, and is also kind of challenging for a lot of Marketo folks to troubleshoot, is Salesforce sync errors or dynamic sync errors, any sort of CRM sync errors. Reason being that there can be a lot of them, and the notification messaging can be cryptic if you are not familiar with, say, the Salesforce API, which is where the error messages are coming from. However, that is definitely an area that needs attention, because it means that these records are not getting over to your CRM, which means sales is not getting the updated information, which means you might be missing out on opportunities and revenue. So that's definitely a big piece. And there are some community posts about what some of those particular errors mean and how you can go about reconciling them. A lot of it does involve coordinating with your Salesforce admin to answer questions or look into things on the Salesforce side. The other thing that I would definitely look into is your campaign queue. This is where you can see all of the trigger campaigns that are waiting in line to run. When you are just starting out with a new instance, unlikely you'll ever see anything there. Trigger campaigns can run very quickly, even for a fairly substantial number of people. But as you have more campaigns and more people in your database, so you're talking about different definitions of scalability, and those are definitely two different components: number of programs, number of records. You can start to see that you will have trigger campaigns lining up in the queue. What that means is it's taking more time for Marketo to process all of them. That might be an opportunity to figure out, one, can I change the priority for a couple key trigger campaigns? So that's a relatively new feature where you can override the priority. Another thing might be, do all of these need to be triggers, especially if it's running for a large number of people? It might be more efficient to run it as a batch campaign instead of a trigger. So especially if it's something that does not need to happen immediately, definitely consider using a batch instead. So those are two areas where you might see some kind of urgent issues that you need to address. Auditing can mean a lot of things. Sometimes it's something broken and not working as expected, like in these examples. But it can also mean, do we have a consistent naming convention like other folks were talking about? How many of our database folks are marketable? Like that, those are other areas of auditing that you can take a look at. But in my mind, I try to prioritize what is preventing our sales and marketing process from running. What is halting that, or what is delaying it? And the campaign backlog and Salesforce sync errors or backlog are two of the big culprits.
Thank you. Very, very helpful. And then I really liked you talking about the different kinds of scalability, and that there's a lot that goes into how you grow. And I think one other thing that people also think about is, like, as you grow, being able to manage some of this stuff. And so we did have a question come in that was relating to segmentations, and because Marketo does have a limit to how many segmentations you can have within an instance, so not just a workspace or workspace, but within an entire instance. So their question was, in my instance, I often have issues with contacts falling into multiple segmentations at once, just due to the nature of their product, and that dynamic content is not available. useful. Now that I've hit the 100 segments threshold, I'm at a loss for how to make dynamic content functional. How do I handle this? Jane, do you have any tips on how they might be able to tackle this issue?
Yeah, sure. So dynamic functionality in Marketo is based off the segmentation functionality. And the way that it works is that Marketo leads can only be in one segment of a segmentation. And the system checks if they match a specific rule, and if they don't, then like if they match the second one or the third one. So it really depends on what you're trying to reach here and like how you want to segment those groups. But if you don't want them to be mutually exclusive, I would say to like minimize and create like one segmentation for each, so that in each segmentation you have one default rule and a single segment, and that will help you to avoid mistakes and make sure that leads of the same leads are not falling into few segments at the same time. And that will also help you to like really clean up those lists, and it helps in nurture campaigns a lot if your nurture is based on segments. And in general, like as a rule of thumb, don't overcomplicate things, and that will make your work easier and will help to make sure that leads are not being stuck in purgatory of not falling into specific rules or getting into different segments at the same time.
And you had mentioned too, like when people are setting up an instance and things like that, what are some, and I can throw this out to the entire group, because I think we probably, there are two sides of this coin of setting things up. I think it's one, when you have a fresh, new, sparkly instance that's completely empty. And then two is when you are stepping into the role and it's now yours. So you're the person who was there before may or may not be there anymore. So this is yours now. So I guess, we can start things off. Beth, do you have any important things to keep in mind that people can keep in mind when they're starting with a fresh, new, clean instance?
This is such a treat. I know so many people are jealous when people get to start up a new instance. I think the most important thing to keep in mind is plan and strategy first, then build. Marketo can be really easy to work in. You can just dive right in, start building things. But as other people have talked about, if you don't establish things like naming conventions, folders, make decisions about what channels you need and what program services you should have, if you don't make those decisions when you first start, it can be so much harder to make those changes and apply best practices later. So do as much research as you can to help you plan out well as you start to build. You might also want to work with a consultant who has experience with a new Marketo instance. I know sometimes folks kind of get thrown into it without having the background. But now is your chance to establish good practices. So take advantage of that opportunity and apply a lot of the things that the panelists have talked about today.
And would you, just to follow up on that, because we did have a question come in the chat, do you have any advice? Is that advice the same depending on the size? So if someone's small, if someone's in a larger, or let's say they have a very large organization, like the question who asked was about 750,000 leads. So do you have different advice for the different sizes?
So if you do work at an organization that's considered like an enterprise, and there's a lot of users, there's a lot of records, there's a lot of expectations for what marketing is going to be taking place in a short period of time, you're definitely going to want to work with experts from various stakeholder groups within your organization. So even more important to make sure that you're starting off on the right path, because otherwise it's going to be really difficult to kind of catch up and redirect and get back into a more scalable path. Most people are probably going to start at the smaller side, because just naturally over time, businesses are going to grow, your database is going to grow as you collect more leads. So plan for what you have now as well as for the future. It's unlikely that businesses are going to just stay at the same level. Like what we're doing today is what we're going to do forever. That's usually not the case. So I think if you are coming from, say, a different marketing automation platform or other processes, there's a lot more complexities in how that will translate from a different tool to Marketo Engage. So there's other considerations there. If you're kind of starting from scratch in Marketo, coming from somewhere else. But either way, plan for the future too. Don't just think about, okay, I'm just going to solve for what we're doing today, because now you're going to have to make changes as you grow and scale over time.
And has anyone else on the call had the benefit of starting with a brand new shiny instance and can provide any insights? Lauren.
It's always, like you said, sparkly and shiny and magical, but it's super easy to kind of get overwhelmed. I think Chris in the chat earlier dropped some pointers around the beginner templates that you can pop in there. Are they perfect? No. But will they give you a running start, and can you customize them for program templates? You sure can. The design templates are a little bit trickier, but there are vendors in the market that can help you. If you don't code, there are no code or low code platforms where you can get branded templates to pop in there and to make things feasible. So I think it depends on the size of the team that you're wielding with the new instance. If it's small and mighty, take it step by step and build out something. Know that Rome wasn't built in a day, but if you've got an awesome big team, then keep them organized, keep it tidy, but enjoy and build for the future as if it will one day be owned and managed by somebody else, and create the documentation and the legacy that you'd want to hand off.
And with that too, so now for those who are not so lucky, or rather maybe the documentation is great and they are lucky and they walked into something that's great, but what tips do you have for when someone is stepping in and is inheriting an instance? What can they do to kind of make it their own and then also plan for that future scalability?
I could probably speak to that one too. That's more often than not, I'd say 75%, 80% of the time what you see. Before you start making changes, make sure you take time to understand what you're looking at and talk to people and learn how the instance is supporting the org, where the deltas are, known frustrations, like be a listener and an observer before an actor, and take a quick inventory. Maybe make a punch list of yourself of quick wins, but before you start tinkering, make sure you have a full-on understanding of the company, the culture, and the processes that this instance is supporting, right? And once you feel comfortable and you've got the lay of the land, like I've inherited Marketo mansions, and you have to really kind of understand that some of the renovations, maybe even entire wings of the house, were built by different authors, right? And often you're inheriting an instance with multiple authorship. And sometimes those pieces are seamless and you can't tell the difference between the original house and the new wing. More often than not, you can. But understanding the total architecture before you start renovating yourself is really important.
Can I add a few points over here?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So I have had experience of managing large instances where we had 8 million records to, small instances as well, where the record size was 8,000. Most of the time I have seen that, we don't get documentation, and there are multiple people who have managed Marketo. They may or may not be the right resources within the team. So to begin with, if I'm being hired either as an employee or as a consultant, the first thing that I would do is to audit the admin section. How many users we have, how many users are having admin accesses, and how many of people which are there with, with external domains, external email IDs, which are not part of the organization, and they have read, write, or the other kind of things. for Marketo. The another thing would be to check all the integrations. Are we still using those? If not, clean that. And then, the first thing that I would always start is going to be the admin side. Second thing, and within admin, there is another thing called field management. It is very important. You can see various examples, like, a client of mine was using a field on the form, and that field was actually linked to the account object. So technically, no one was writing that field. So, that kind of thing you could actually see. The another thing, if you have inherited an instance, please check all the reports. I would start with the landing page performance report. You can actually see, and you can pay actually the most important thing on the unsubscribes, how the unsubscribes are being managed, whether people who are clicking or filling out the form for unsubscribe, are they really being unsubscribed or not? So that would be the another thing that I would suggest. And then go for email deliverability. If you have access to Revenue Cycle Explorer, always try to find it out how many spam complaint you're getting it directly from the ISPs. And then, maybe you may want to check that which emails are triggering those, and you may want to curate your content or the way you're sending your emails accordingly. And the another thing would be to check the database, how many redundant records you have. So that would be that, and especially in the cases where, we are dealing with a large database set, 8 million or 9 million, there is very high potential of having, spam traps. So the best thing would be to, have an email validation platform that could link with Marketo, so that you can actually find out all the redundant email addresses and get those cleaned. And the email deliverability is most important thing whenever you're dealing with the large database, because, an email can land to spam folder, and Marketo can still show it that, it got delivered. So the best thing is that, you can always use Marketo's email deliverability platform to find it out whether your email IDs are being blacklisted somewhere, or that kind of a thing. So the email deliverability would be the next thing. And then, yes, right, like everyone said, that, Salesforce Sync is the most crucial one. If there are backlogs, that are the again an issue with the Marketo sync cycle. But yeah, these are the points that I would highly recommend to audit the admin instance whenever you're getting into Marketo.
And I know that oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a few words about archiving, because when you're inheriting an instance, sometimes it has older campaigns that might be running or not running. And when you're visiting outdated assets, make sure that you check for those that are no longer relevant. And before you archive them, you deactivate them, because the rules in Marketo are as follows. If you do not deactivate a specific asset and you move it into the archive, if that's campaign is still going to be running, and just check for all of the landing pages that are being used in tests, if they're still running, because if you archive those, then that may cause a problem too. So make sure to do all the due diligence on the assets too, and not just on the database.
That is a great, that's a great tip. And we just have like 5 minutes left. And I know that we've just been talking about, documentation, and Ajay and Lauren had some great tips, but does anybody else have any tips on how? I think that documentation, especially either when you've inherited or when your instance is sparkly new, is really daunting. So what are some other best practices that folks can use when they want to start documenting, or they need to update their documentation? I'm going to throw that out to really, I know that we've had folks already talk about this, but anybody, I'll throw it out to everybody.
I'd say start with proper. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. No, I insist. Go ahead, Beth.
One thing that you can do as kind of a very quick and easy way is just record yourself doing something. So if you want to document how you set up a new webinar, you got a new webinar to create this week? Great. Use the recording tool on your computer, or sometimes I'll just log into Zoom and record a meeting of myself, but documenting all the steps that I'm going through, and I just kind of talk out loud, right? So at least there's something that I can reference or somebody else can reference, but that's one way to get started, especially if you're not really comfortable writing, or you don't really know, where to save it. Like, you can at least record what you're already doing.
That's awesome. That's kind of what I was going to say, was the great minds think alike there, Beth. Hey? Loom or QuickTime are super easy. I love the Zoom thing though. And start with your operational programs, right? So if you're like, okay, where do I even begin? Start with scoring, start with routing, start with the big rocks. You know what I mean? Because you know, if you have scoring probably in 6 months' time, if there's new high value content, or if you need to make changes to your threshold or your values, that is probably going to not look the same in 6 months. And if you don't document the changes, there's not like an undo button, right? So you're not going to know what it looked like before you started tinkering. So I would take a baseline of your operational programs. Those are the most vital, and then maybe move into that center of excellence and start documenting your templates. But video is such a fast and easy way to do it. So I definitely second what Beth has to say there.
I just wanted to add that it's a great practice to create different documentation for different use cases. And if your designer wants to go ahead and create design asset in Marketo, or to create a design for a landing page, make sure that you're speaking their eye level, that you're not being too technical and going over just the elements that they will need. So I'd say that creating user-based documentation definitely helped me to work with my team, and help to onboard new developers, because we work a lot with Marketo templates, and explaining how to use Marketo modules was a big help. While designers really appreciate only looking at the design studio, not having to deal with any of the coding. So definitely to that. I use Snagit, that's the platform that we use at Wix. It's been really helpful because you can do snapshots, you can record your screens, and yeah, or Zoom, both great tools.
And I think now, especially because we're seeing the new user interface, I know a lot of folks, if you've inherited an instance that's a little bit older, it might be time to update your documentation if your old documentation isn't in the classic view. So maybe that's your cue that it is time to update things. With just a few minutes left, we can go around to the panel and just maybe give like one quick tip when folks are thinking about, if they're not quite at the point where they're scaling, like one quick sentence about something that they might be. I know it's hard to boil down into one sentence, but something they could do when they're thinking about scaling. Ajay, do you want to start us off?
Use segmentation, have more personalization at scale. This is what I would suggest. Spray and pray doesn't work.
And Beth, do you want to go next?
It's kind of related to things that I've talked about with the Salesforce sync, a number of records, things like that. When planning what fields are going to sync over, limit it to what you actually are going to use in Marketo, because that is going to save you a lot of headache in terms of slowness of the sync and clutter in your instance with a bunch of fields that you're never ever going to use. So that's my tip.
I'd say using single lead intake flow, and you can make it as complex as you want, but having it all in one place instead of creating those flows separate in each program, it saved my time and headache and really helped optimize the instance.
And just to put a bow on it, I think as you start to scale and you start to rev that demand gen engine and start to see results flowing through to sales, make sure what you're passing over is useful, actionable information and not noise, right? So the consumers of your information are going to turn it into revenue if you're doing your job right. So make sure when you're handing people over, they actually want to have conversations, and that your sales team has the data and insights that they need to have important and relevant conversations, right? So think about sales as your customer.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Thank you so much to our entire panel today, to our hosts, and as well as to everybody attending. Remember, you will get all the slides and the videos sent to you afterward. It's been great chatting with everybody today. Thank you so much.